Hello and welcome to QX. Today I'd like to introduce you to our QX Unicycle Toolbox. First, let's look at the content. I'll open the box, and as you can see, that's inside. I'll start by explaining the Allen keys. They're color indexed, so every size has a specific color, and they have two sides. This side, which is quite useful if you have badly accessible screws, and the normal side. This 5mm Allen key is useful, for example, for the bearing cup holders on the QX frames, or for Q-axle crank bolts, or for the brake caliper. The 4mm Allen key is useful for the seat post, seat fixing screws, or for the bumper screws on the QX11, for example. The 8mm Allen key is useful for crank arm bolts, like on this only one or on the Luxus series unicycles. So far for the Allen keys. You can tally them up by putting them all together. This way you won't lose one. So next tool is our 10mm ratchet. This ratchet is a tool you'll love. Also on the bicycle. It's for the bearing cup holders on Luxus or only one. And as you can see with the ratchet side, you can turn in both directions, untightening or tightening the screws very fast, very quickly, and also on badly accessible bolts you will gain a lot of time by using it. Then we have the tire levers, 3 pieces. You can stick them together and they are metal reinforced, so very solid and rigid. Sometimes on some tires or rims you need a lot of force. So start by putting the air out of the tire. I'll just put a corner of the lever in the valve to put the air out. And then you just push the tire a bit in the middle of the rim and lever the tire off at one place. You can lock the tire lever into the spoke. Now it went off, I didn't lock it properly. So let's just push it a little bit over here and lock it properly, and then you take a second lever, go in at some distance and lever the tire out, and then you push it on the rim to lever the tire off the rim. As you can see, it works quite easily this way. The rest is easy to take off by hand. To put it on, take your hands for the first, watch out not to pinch the tube, and for the last part you can also take the tire lever again to put it on the rim. So that for the tire levers. Now there's a spoke key also in the box, which is a tool for experts. You should be a little bit experienced or at least have some feeling for this. You have 3 different sizes for 3 different nipple sizes, and you can just put it onto the spoke nipple. The black one here is too small, the green one's too big, and the red size is the right one for the only one. And then you can turn clockwise to put more tension on, or counterclockwise to decrease tension, but maybe ask your dealer if you're not experienced. It's not that simple actually. So next tool is the Crank-extractor and the 15mm wrench, which we will use first. This is the Q-axle cap tool. The use of this is shown in another of our videos, the Q-axle crank assembly and disassembly. See the link for further information. And then we have the 15mm wrench with the big lever, and this is classically to put pedals off. You have a right and a left pedal. You can see on the inside of the crank is marked which side it is. The right pedal is taken off counterclockwise, and the left pedal is taken off by turning it clockwise. And then you can just turn the rest off with your hand. I'll take that pedal off now so that I can show you the crank extractor afterwards. And so we're off. ISIS and square taper cranks have a conic interface, so the crank is pressed with an 8mm bolt on the conic axle, and First of all, I'll take that 8mm bolt off by turning the bolt counterclockwise on both sides of the unicycle with that Allen key. But even once the bolt has come off, you won't be able to take the crank off because it's pressed on the axle. So this is where I need the extractor. You see a little thread here inside in the crank where we're going to put the extractor in. There's a black knob in the front of the crank extractor, which is for ISIS cranks. And then you can turn one part and the other. This is the end position, but to use it you have to pull it totally back, and then you take the black knob off because, as mentioned, that's for ISIS axles, and here we have a taper square. So I'll just put that aside, and then I'll take the big part of the crank extractor and screw it carefully into the crank with my hands. This has to go very easily in. Don't put some force on it, otherwise you'll damage the thread, and only when it's totally in you take the wrench and tighten it in properly. Then you turn the inside part in as much as you can until you take the lever, and by turning that clockwise into the crank extractor you'll press the crank off from the axle, and then you can take the crank arm off. To extract the extractor you'll need the wrench again because we just bolted it in, but really be careful when installing the extractor for the first time to not damage the thread, especially on alloy cranks. They're very fragile for this. So what's left in the box? There's still this instrument left which looks like a medieval torture instrument, but in fact it's just the bearing extractor. So it has 3 little inserts for taper square, ISIS and Q-axle cranks, and also such a bolt to screw it in. So I'll take the toolbox away to have some room to show you how to use that tool, which is very useful to take the bearings off from a unicycle wheel as they're pressed on the axle too. First, I'll take the frame off with my favorite tool, the 10mm ratchet. See, it really works very fast, and especially if you have to work a lot with 10mm bolts, it's an awesome tool, also on the bicycle, like for mud guards and all that type of screws. So far for one side, put the bolts away, take care not to lose the washers. And then same for the other side. Third bolt and the fourth bolt. Now I can put the frame away. And now let's extract the bearing. To do so, first turn the screw in the crank extractor out as much as you can, and then you place this part on the axle, and all 3 arms should grab behind the bearing. Pinch it together so that it properly aligns, and then you turn the screw in until it touches the axle. Next you'll need a 17mm wrench, which is not provided with the box but very popular and in most toolboxes at home. And with this you screw the inner part, the inner screw, into the bearing extractor. Take care to prevent it from twisting with the axle because then it won't work. You have to figure out a little bit how to hold that all together best without doing yourself some pain. So I'll take one hand to fix the bearing extractor, and I'll take the other hand to move the screw clockwise into the crank extractor. You'll need some force because it's really pressed on the axle, so best handling is really to take, like here, one hand to hold the bearing extractor at the place and the other hand to use the wrench, and then you'll slightly feel it coming off from the axle. And this works same for Q-axle or for ISIS cranks. And I can tell you it's even harder if you can't look properly at it because you're filming that situation. But here we've come off and the bearing is off. and there is still a little spacer between the hub and the bearing. So far. So you'll maybe take a new bearing, and with that new bearing you'd like to put it onto the axle again, and that's what the other tool here is made for, this one, and it has two inserts. One is again for Q-axle, one is for ISIS, and one is for taper square, which is the one we are going to need for that wheel here. So I'll put the box aside again so that you can see what I'm doing. And then you put the bearing off, maybe put some grease on the axle so that it slides in properly, like on this surface. Watch out to have the spacer in, align that properly. Then you put the tool on and hammer it on. Watch really for your hands, not to hammer on your hands. Watch if it aligns with the spacer, and once it is properly aligned, you've put the bearing on the axle, turns well, and is aligned. And now you can put the crank arm back on again with the 8mm bolt. And now there is only one tool left in the box, the tube cutter, which is to shorten seat posts for small riders. It's a quite simple tool with a cutting wheel, a rasp, and a spare cutting wheel underneath. And to use it, you just take a seat post, you align it into the seat tube cutter, and then you turn the cutting wheel in so that you have a little resistance, not too much. Then you make the first turn into the material, re-tighten it, make some further turns. Once it gets easier, you re-tighten on the bolt until the cutting wheel gets more and more into the material. Don't tighten too much in the beginning, otherwise you might pinch the tube and then it doesn't get in the unicycle back again. So rather more little steps than one big one, and then you'll be easily cutting that seat tube off, like here. So far. Now to take the swarf off, you just rasp them off. If you have a metal rasp in your toolbox, take that one, maybe it's easier, but this one you have one handy with yourself. And then you shorten the seat post. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.